The sun was sinking behind the red ridges when Rafe Calder rode into Drywater. The sky burned like banked coals. Heat pressed close. Dust climbed off the street and hung in the light. He felt it on his tongue, bitter and old. He had known that taste before. It tasted like endings. His horse Flint kept an easy pace, calm. Rafe liked a horse that never lied. Flint had the weight of a horse that had packed through storms and fire and come back slow. They moved past shuttered windows, past a livery that leaned like a tired man, past a church bell that had not rung in a while. The town held its breath. Rafe felt the way people watched from behind curtains. He did not look at them. He listened. He listened the way a man listens after years on the edge. You learn more from quiet than you do from talk. He saw the saloon at the far end of the street, lamps already lit. On the porch, a sign swung and clicked against the chain. Drywater drank early. That meant trouble lived close. Rafe touched the rough leather at his hip. He kept the iron low. He did not grasp it. Not yet. He was not here for whiskey. He was not here for a bed. He was here to settle a name that had followed him across 3 counties like a hungry dog. Kincaid. A ranch boss who fed on fear. A man who paid others to bleed in his place. Rafe had seen Kincaid's brand burned into a widow's fence and into a boy's shoulder. That was enough. He did not come for revenge. He came for rest. Sometimes a man must lay down a weight to breathe. Halfway down the street he saw her. Lila Monroe stood on the steps of the general store. The last light found her hair and set it glowing like wheat after rain. She wore a simple working dress, but it held a kind of stubborn grace. She held a ledger close against her ribs. Her chin was lifted, but not high, not proud for show, only steady. He had never seen her before, but he recognized the quiet in her face. A woman who had learned to stitch her own wounds. A woman who knew how to keep a door locked and still keep a lamp lit. Rafe did not slow, but his eyes did. Just a breath. A pause that landed like a hand on a hot stove and lifted quick. So he told himself it was nothing. He told himself a lot of things. A breeze came down off the mesa and brought the scent of cedar smoke and far thunder. It also brought a whisper of boots scuffing behind the hotel. Rafe did not turn his head, but Flint's ears tipped. 3 men, maybe. The scrape of a spur that did not hang right. The hitch of a laugh that tried too hard. Ambush was a lazy art. Most men wanted an easy kill. They did not know what death sounded like until it was already speaking. Rafe touched Flint with his knee, and the horse angled toward the alley beside the cooper's shop. The alley held shade, and shade held stories. The first shape stepped out like it meant to be a wall. The second stayed deeper. The third worked a little rifle and called it nothing by keeping quiet. Rafe stopped with one boot still in sun. He raised both hands, slow, palms empty. He had learned long ago that an empty hand could carry more power than a drawn gun. Men rushed a gun. They hesitated at an emptiness they did not expect. Afternoon light slanted across the first man's cheek. Scar from ear to jaw. Not Kincaid, a higher. The man grinned like a crack in dry earth. He spoke, but Rafe did not study the words. He studied his hands, the way they fluttered before they fixed, the way his weight slid to the wrong foot. This one needed a crowd to feel big. The crowd was only 2. But then she spoke, a soft voice from the mouth of the alley. Lila Monroe. No ledger now. She held a basket of lamp oil and bread. It did not shake, but her breath did. She did not run. She did not cry out. She said, plain as a morning bell, that the sheriff was walking the street and would turn the corner soon. The lie walked out clean and stood between men and gunfire. The second man shifted in the dark. He had the kind of stillness that was not peace. Snake stillness. He said nothing. He listened. Rafe watched his shoulder turn toward the hotel corner where no sheriff would appear. The third man moved his rifle in the shadow. Impatient. Rafe let the moment stretch. He let it pull tight like rawhide that had been soaked and now dry. He remembered a windmill from a winter ranch. The wood creaked the same way right before a blade snapped. He knew when to step aside. He knew when to lean in. He chose to lean. He dropped from the saddle in a single slide. Low, both hands still up. His hat brim cut the light. Dust rose like breath. He talked in that even voice men use when they are telling a horse it is all right. He asked if the men were lost. He asked if they needed a map to Kincaid's fear. Scarcheek laughed for real then, and that was when the second man lifted his wrist. A flicker, the smallest tell. Rafe moved. He went for the nearest gun, only after his shoulder already filled the space where the first bullet wanted to live. The shot cracked and took a splinter out of the Cooper's door. Flint reared once and stamped. The rifle in the back fired wild and tore a curl off the hotel post. Rafe rolled and felt the ground bite his ribs. He did not think. He did not feel. He worked 2 shots fast, low, clean. The first man dropped with surprise still in his mouth. The second staggered into light, a red bloom opening on his sleeve. He swore like a prayer and ran. The third man tried to work the lever and learn courage at the same time. It was a lot to hold. Rafe stood and stepped into his line. He looked into the man's eyes and saw a boy who had only learned how to take orders. Rafe told him to drop the rifle. He said it quiet, and the boy did. The street took the sound of iron hitting dirt and drank it. Silence came back. Not peace yet, only the space where men decide what they will be next. Rafe reloaded by habit, slow, one eye on the corners. Lila had not moved. The basket still hung from her arm. She met his gaze. Her eyes were blue, but not the kind that said ocean, the kind that said distant mountain snow and the hunger that came after it. He wanted to look away. He did not. He told her thank you. The words felt strange in his mouth. She said it was nothing. It was not nothing. It took a kind of courage that does not come from the hand. It comes from the heart, and the way it refuses to harden. He picked up his hat and brushed the dust. She stepped closer. The air smelled like bread and lamp oil and gun smoke. He could taste the mix on his tongue, and it tasted like a life trying to begin inside an old one. What he did not know was that Lila had her own account to settle, not with a man like Kincaid, but with the night that had taken her father on the ridge road and left a broken wagon and a home that never felt the same. She had promised herself she would never stand still while another man bled on her street. That promise had moved her lips while fear did its work. The crowd found its breath and came back to the windows. A curtain lifted, a whisper ran. The town had seen violence before. It would see it again. But something different had come with this rider. It was not swagger. It was not pride. It was a quiet that named things and did not look away. The sheriff did turn the corner then, late by a life and a half. He took in the bodies and the gun, and the way the dust still drifted where the second man had run. He nodded once. He knew Rafe by the way a man stands when the killing is over. He asked no questions. Not yet. Rafe slid the iron home and felt the weight as if it had grown an inch heavier. He was still facing the saloon at the far end of the street. The lamps inside flickered like a dare. He knew Kincaid's men would be waiting. He knew what sunset could do to a man's aim. Lila spoke again. She told him to be careful if he walked that way. He said he would. It sounded like a lie you tell to keep someone from worrying. It felt like the truth of a man who had learned to hold his life in open hands. He took one step, then another. The light was almost gone. The street held that hush that comes before thunder. Somewhere behind him, a horse shook out its mane. Somewhere in front of him, a piano hit a wrong note and stopped. If this story has warmed a quiet corner of your heart, stay close. The night still holds more to tell. The sun was gone when Rafe pushed open the saloon doors. Light spilled out in streaks of amber and smoke. The air was thick with sweat, whiskey, and the tune of a tired piano. A few men turned their heads. Most pretended not to see him. That was fine. Pretending had always been safer than knowing. He took 2 steps in. The boards under his boots complained like old men remembering pain. He saw the barkeep first, thin, nervous, wiping the same glass too long. Behind him hung a mirror cracked down the middle. It split the room like a truth no one wanted to face. Ray found a corner table where the wall met the dark. He liked edges that gave you something to lean against. He ordered whiskey with a nod. The barkeep poured it without asking for coin. Men who lived this far from law knew a certain kind of guest carried his own payment. A woman sang near the piano. Her voice carried years of dust. She sang about leaving, about men who never came home, about stars that stayed too far away to trust. Rafe listened. He could feel the story under her voice. Broken things trying to sound whole. He knew that tune. He had been it once. At the far table sat 3 riders, Kincaid's colors on their coats. They didn't hide them. The one in the middle wore a grin that reached too far. He had that look of a man who wanted someone to notice he was dangerous. His hand rested on a Colt. The others followed his lead like dogs trained on fear. Rafe sipped. The whiskey burned soft, like an old wound. He waited. Men like that never stayed quiet long. The grinning one rose, walked slow. His spurs sang. "You Calder?" he said, voice thick with the scent of a dare. Rafe didn't answer. He looked down at the glass and watched the light die inside it. The man tapped the table with his gun barrel. "Kincaid says you got something belongs to him." Rafe lifted his eyes. Calm. "Then Kincaid's wrong." The man laughed. Too loud. The sound made the piano falter. "You took his herd at Mesa Ridge. You took his pride. He wants both back." Rafe said, "Tell him pride don't travel well." The room went still. The barkeep ducked his head. The woman's song broke in half. Outside, thunder rolled low across the desert. The man's grin died. His hand twitched. Rafe saw it before it happened. The pull, the flash. The shot cracked, echoed, died fast. The man fell before he hit the floor. Rafe hadn't stood. He hadn't aimed long. The smoke rose between them, curling like memory. The others didn't draw. They backed away slow, eyes wide. There was something in Rafe's face that told them the next breath could cost too much. They left their friend on the floor and pushed into the night. Rafe reloaded with steady hands. The saloon stayed silent, except for the drip of spilled whiskey. He set his glass down. Untouched, the singer moved from the stage. Her name was Pearl. She had been here longer than law, longer than hope. She looked at Rafe and said, "You just bought yourself a grave, stranger." He said, "I've been digging it a long time." She almost smiled, then shook her head. "Kincaid won't come himself. He'll send more. He always does." "I'm counting on it," Rafe said. He turned toward the door. The night waited like a held breath. But before he stepped out, he heard a voice from the street. A voice that cut through the storm's growl. Lila Monroe. She was standing by the hitch rail, rain beginning to find her hair. Her shawl clung to her shoulders, dark with water. She looked at him like she hadn't decided whether to be afraid or not. "You think killing his men will stop him?" she asked. "No," Rafe said, "but it'll remind him. I'm not done." She shook her head. "Men like him don't stop. They just keep aching until there's nothing left to break." Rafe stepped closer. The rain made her eyes shine in the lamplight. "Then maybe he finally breaks on me." Lightning tore the horizon. For a moment they both stood in the white blaze. Two souls caught between fight and ruin. She looked at his gun, then his hands. "You carry too much blood," she whispered. He said, "And you carry too much kindness." That made her laugh, soft and bitter. "Kindness don't last out here." "Maybe not," he said, "but it's the only thing worth losing." The wind lifted her hair across her face. He wanted to touch it back, but didn't. She saw the pause in him, the way his fingers twitched once, then stilled. Something unspoken passed. Trust shaped out of danger. A horse whinnied from down the street. The thunder moved closer. He could smell the wet dust, the sharp iron of rain. He knew what waited before dawn. Kincaid's riders, maybe Kincaid himself. He looked at her one last time. "Go inside, Lila." She didn't move. "You won't make it alone." "I've been alone longer than most men live." "Doesn't make it right." He didn't argue. He just nodded, pulled his hat low, and walked into the storm. The wind took his coat and made it a shadow behind him. Lila watched him disappear toward the ridge road, where the sky cracked with fire. She felt the ache of something she hadn't named yet. Not love, not fear. Something older. Something that sounded like memory trying to return. She turned back toward the saloon. Pearl met her eyes from the doorway. "That man's got ghosts walking beside him," Pearl said. Lila whispered, "Maybe they're the only ones keeping him alive." The storm came down hard. Lamps flickered. The desert swallowed the light. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a gun waited for morning. Morning crawled out slow over Drywater, dragging thin light and silence behind it. The storm had passed, but the ground still held the smell of rain and powder. The street was washed clean, as if the desert tried to forget what it had seen. It never did. Rafe sat on the porch of the livery, his hat low, hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee gone cold. Flint grazed nearby, tail swishing at flies. His shoulder throbbed where the night had brushed too close, a graze from a stray shot. He hadn't bothered to patch it. Pain reminded him he was still here. He watched the sun climb over the ridge and thought about the face of Kincaid. Thought about the years that name had followed him like a curse. Thought about the woman who had stepped into the alley yesterday and stopped a bullet with her voice. Lila Monroe. Her name fit the dawn, soft but strong enough to rise again. The sheriff came walking up the street. Old coat, new badge. A man stretched thin between law and loneliness. He stopped at the bottom of the steps and squinted at Rafe. "Calder," he said, "you got a long shadow behind you." "Most men do," Rafe said. The sheriff spat into the dust. "Those 3 you shot belong to Kincaid's South Herd. Words he's riding this way." Rafe nodded. "I figured. You staying?" "Till it's done." The sheriff studied him for a moment. "You ain't the first man to want Kincaid dead." "I don't want him dead," Rafe said. "I just want him stopped." The sheriff's jaw worked slow. "Same thing, far as I've seen." He turned and walked off, boots crunching on the damp dirt. Rafe watched him fade into sunlight. From across the street came the creak of a door. Lila stepped out of the store, her hair tied back, her sleeves rolled. She carried a sack of grain, smaller than she could have managed, but heavy all the same. Rafe stood before he meant to. He crossed the street without thinking. "Let me," he said, taking the weight from her arms. She looked at him, wary but not unkind. "You always fix what you didn't break?" "Sometimes it's the only thing worth doing." He followed her inside. The shop smelled of cedar, flour, and candle smoke. Shelves lined with what passed for comfort in a place like this. Soap, bullets, dried fruit, the kind of store that kept a town alive one small thing at a time. Lila moved behind the counter. "You sleep?" she asked. "Didn't need to." "You will," she said. "Every man does. Even ghosts." He met her eyes. "You think that's what I am?" "I think you're a man who's forgotten how to stop running." He leaned a shoulder against the doorframe. "Maybe I just haven't found a reason." Her gaze held steady. "And when you do, then maybe I'll stop." She folded a sack, quiet. The room filled with the sound of paper and dust. Outside, a horse whinnied, and someone shouted about broken fences. Life went on the way it always did, pretending not to notice the storm that still waited at the edge of the desert. "You lost someone," he said. Her hands froze. The softness in her face turned sharp, like glass catching light. "Everyone out here's lost someone." He nodded. "But not everyone keeps looking for 'em in strangers." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then she said, "You talk like a man who's tired of hearing himself think." "Maybe," he said. "Maybe I just miss silence that isn't empty." She looked away first. Her breath shook once before she steadied it. "My father," she said. "He was hauling timber from the ridge road. Wagon went down after a flash flood. Sheriff said it was the weather, but folks around here know better. Kincaid's men cut the bridge ropes so no one would bring supplies to the valley that winter." Rafe felt the words land inside him like stones dropped in a well. "You sure?" She nodded. "I found the tracks myself. His brand on the saddle left behind. Same brand you came here to end." Their eyes met again, and something quiet shifted between them, like wind changing before rain. "You could leave," she said, "before it takes you too." Rafe shook his head. "Leaving never fixed what a man let live." She turned away, but he saw her hand tremble as she reached for a jar on the shelf. "Then maybe you're not here for revenge," she said. "Maybe you're here to forgive yourself." He wanted to answer, but the bell above the door rang. A rider stepped in, mud-spattered boots, hat low, one of Kincaid's scouts. The man froze when he saw Rafe. Lila moved fast, stepping between them. "We're closed," she said. The rider grinned. "You look open enough to me." Rafe straightened slow. "You got business?" "Yeah." The man said, Kincaid sent word. Says he remembers you from the ridge. Says he's got something you'll want back. Rafe's blood went cold. What? The man smiled wider. A horse with your brand, and a woman's shawl he found near the river. Said to tell you both he's keeping 'em till you come. Lila's face went pale. Rafe stepped forward. The man reached for his gun, but Rafe's hand was already on his. He slammed the barrel down, twisting it away. The gun hit the counter, wood cracking. The man swore, swung a fist. Rafe caught it, shoved him back through the door. The street saw the scuffle. Dust rose. The rider hit the ground hard. His breath knocked clean. Rafe stood over him. Tell Kincaid I'm coming, he said. Tell him the sun won't set before I do. The man spat blood, climbed onto his horse, and rode hard east. Lila came to the doorway. Her voice was low, shaking. You shouldn't have said that. I've been saying it my whole life, Rafe said. She looked at him for a long time. The morning light caught her face, soft and fierce at once. Then maybe this time, say it for someone who can't anymore. He nodded. I already am. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of dust and thunder again. The horizon trembled with heat. Somewhere out there, Kincaid waited. By noon, the desert shimmered under a merciless sun. Heat rose off the sand in ghostly waves. The land stretched wide and empty, except for the wind whispering through dry mesquite. Rafe rode out from Drywater, heading toward the ridge road. Flint's hooves left small clouds of dust behind them, soft as breath. He had ridden this kind of road before, one that led nowhere but back into memory. Every step seemed to stir old ghosts from the dirt. The sky was a hard blue, no shade, no mercy. He liked it that way. It made a man honest. Behind him, the town shrank into a blur of roofs and smoke. He didn't look back. He learned that looking back cost more than it ever gave. By late afternoon, he reached the edge of the canyon, the place where Lila's father had fallen. The wood bridge was gone, only ropes dangling like dead snakes from the cliffs. The wagon lay rusted at the bottom, half buried in silt. He tied Flint to a scrub tree and climbed down the narrow path, slow and careful. At the bottom, silence held the air heavy. He found pieces of timber still branded with Kincaid's mark. Lila had been right. The ropes hadn't snapped clean. They'd been cut, clean and deliberate. He crouched and ran his fingers over the fibers. His jaw tightened. Some truths didn't fade with time. They waited. He stayed there for a long while. The light changed, sliding gold over the rocks. A hawk circled above, its shadow gliding across the canyon wall. Rafe closed his eyes and saw a different kind of shadow. The face of the man he used to be, the one who believed walking away could fix things, but not this time. He climbed back up. The wind had shifted, cooler now. Thunder muttered low on the horizon. He untied Flint and turned the horse north, toward Kincaid's range. The land there was broken, carved by arroyos and dry riverbeds. It was a place made for ambushes and unfinished reckonings. He rode until the sun began to bleed out behind the hills. Then he saw it, smoke from a campfire. One rider, a small flicker in the vast red distance. He slowed, watching. When he came closer, the rider turned. Lila. She sat on a bay mare, hair loose, cheeks flushed from the heat. A rifle rested across her saddle. She looked at him with that mix of defiance and something gentler that made it hard to breathe. You shouldn't be here, he said. Neither should you. He sighed, pulled Flint to a stop beside her. "You following me?" "I'm not the one who rides loud enough to wake the dust," she said. "You left town without saying goodbye." "Wasn't planning on it." "I figured," she said softly. "But you're not facing Kincaid alone. He took my father. I won't let him take you, too." He looked at her, the firelight flickering in her eyes. "You ever killed a man, Lila?" "No," she said, "but I've buried enough to know what it costs." Rafe stared at her a moment longer, then nodded. "You ride quiet. You stay low. If shooting starts, you run." "I won't run." "Then pray I don't fall," he said. They set up camp near the ridge, where the canyon fell away to the east. The fire crackled between them, throwing orange light on their faces. For a while, neither spoke. The desert had its own language: wind, flame, silence. It said enough. After a time, she asked, "Why him, Rafe? Why chase a man like Kincaid when there's nothing left to prove?" He stared into the fire. "He took my brother's life for a herd of stolen horses. Left him hanging in the wind with a note pinned to his coat. Said justice was what a man could buy. I rode too late that day. Been riding since." Her voice softened. "And when you find him, I'll ask if he remembers the boy's name. Then I'll let the desert decide the rest." Lila looked down at her hands, small and strong against the rifle stock. "You think killing him will make it right?" "No," Rafe said, "but it'll make it quiet." The wind picked up, carrying sand through the firelight. Sparks rose and drifted like stars caught in a storm. Lila pulled her shawl tighter. He watched her fingers, the way they trembled just before she steadied them. "You're not afraid of dying," she said. "No," he said, "just of not finishing what needs to be done." She looked at him for a long time, the firelight painting her face gold. "You think there's still something left to live for after that?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe. Haven't found it yet." The night deepened. Coyotes called somewhere far away. The fire burned low. She lay down, her head resting near his saddle, eyes closing slow. He sat awake, listening to her breathing, the soft rustle of fabric against dust. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace trying to find him. But peace never stayed long out here. Before dawn, Flint's ears flicked. Rafe's hand went to his gun. He saw shadows moving against the ridge. 3, maybe 4 riders, Kincaid's scouts. He kicked dirt over the fire and reached for Lila's shoulder. Time to move. She woke fast, grabbed her rifle. The two of them slipped into the rocks as hooves thundered closer. The riders passed below, their voices hard in the wind. Rafe waited until the last echo died. Then he looked at Lila. Her breath came quick, eyes bright with fear and fire. "You still think you should have come?" he whispered. She met his gaze. I think I was meant to." He almost smiled. "Then stay close." He led her down the ridge path, shadows swallowing their trail. Behind them, dawn began to break, thin and red as blood. Dawn came cold and pale across the desert. The sky was the color of steel before it softens to day. Rafe and Lila rode along the dry riverbed, hooves muffled by sand. The air smelled of smoke far ahead, campfire smoke, heavy and low. Kincaid's men were close. Rafe pulled Flint to a halt near a line of boulders and lifted a hand. Lila stopped beside him, breath misting in the chill. She followed his gaze to the ridge ahead, where a thin column of smoke twisted upward. "That's them," she whispered. He nodded. 2 miles, maybe less. He's setting camp on the old mining road. She looked at him, voice low. You mean to walk in there alone? I mean to walk in quiet, he said. Alone if I have to. The light caught his face, and she saw what the desert had carved there. Lines made by years of dust, loss, and miles without comfort. But there was something else, too. Something soft beneath the grit. She took a slow breath. You don't have to do this, Rafe. You could ride west. Start over. He smiled faintly. West don't change what's behind you. It just hides it in another sunset. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her saddlebag and handed him a strip of cloth. Clean linen from her store. For your arm, she said. The wound's still bleeding. He looked down at the small mark just below his shoulder. The bullet grazed from Drywater. He hadn't noticed how much it burned until now. You keep thinking of other folks' hurts, he said quietly. She shrugged. Maybe it's the only way I forget mine. He tied the cloth around his arm, her fingers brushing his skin once as she helped. The touch was light, but it carried something neither of them spoke of. A small tremor that went deeper than the wound. When it was done, he looked at her. Really looked this time. The sun had found her hair and turned it gold. Her eyes caught the light like deep water. You shouldn't be here, he said again, softer now. She smiled. And yet I am. He didn't have a word for what rose inside him. Something like gratitude tangled with fear. They dismounted and led the horses into a shallow gully. Rafe studied the ridge through his scope. 4 men near the fire. One in a wide brim hat, sitting apart, Kincaid. His posture said power. His stillness said cruelty. Wait here, Rafe said. Lila shook her head. I'm not waiting for gunfire. Then stay where I can see you, he said. He moved low through the rocks, each step silent. The desert around him breathed slow and ancient, the kind of stillness that made every heartbeat sound loud. He reached the outer edge of camp, just as one of Kincaid's men turned. The man didn't see him until it was too late. Rafe's arm locked around his neck, pulled him down silent. He laid him in the dust and kept moving. Another step, another shadow, then the sound of boots behind him. Calder, a voice said, you got a death wish or just no sense? Rafe turned slow. Kincaid stood near the fire, gun drawn but low. His face was thinner than Rafe remembered, but the eyes were the same, cold and hollow as river stones. You should have stayed gone, Kincaid said. Ain't no room for ghosts out here. Rafe kept his hand off his gun. I came for what you took. Kincaid smiled. I took a lot of things. You'll need to be more particular. The bridge, Rafe said. The boy. The widow's fence. You know every one of them. Kincaid laughed. You talk like a preacher with no church. You think your bullets can wash sin? Rafe said no, but maybe they can stop it from spreading. Kincaid's eyes narrowed. Then draw. The sound of the draw cut the silence clean. 2 guns, 1 heartbeat. Rafe fired once. So did Kincaid. Kincaid's shot tore past Rafe's arm, burning flesh. Rafe's bullet found Kincaid's side. The man staggered, surprised. The firelight caught his blood as it spread across his coat. He dropped to one knee, gun still in hand. Ain't done yet, he hissed. Rafe stepped closer, weapon steady. You are. Another shot cracked, but it didn't come from Kincaid. One of his men in the rocks had fired. The bullet struck Rafe's shoulder, spinning him halfway around. Pain tore through him like lightning. He hit the ground hard. Lila's voice cried out from the ridge. Rafe! She was running before he could stop her. She fired once, the echo bouncing through the canyon. The man who'd shot Rafe fell back, his rifle clattering against stone. Kincaid raised his gun again, breath ragged. Rafe lifted his head just in time to see Lila step between them. "Don't," she said. Kincaid's eyes flickered. Surprise, then hate. He tried to raise the gun higher, but his strength was gone. The weapon slipped from his fingers. He slumped forward into the dust, still and quiet. The wind came down off the ridge and carried the smoke away. Lila knelt beside Rafe. Her hands were warm against his skin. Blood ran through her fingers, bright in the fading light. "Don't you die on me," she whispered. He smiled, weak but real. "Wouldn't do that. You'd never forgive me." Her eyes glistened, tears mixing with dust. "You fool. You saved me just to bleed for it." He touched her hand, his thumb tracing the back of her wrist. "Not saving you," he said, "just finding something worth staying for." She looked down at him, breath trembling. "Then stay," she said. The sky deepened to crimson. The desert held still, as if listening. Rafe felt the weight of the moment. All the years, all the ghosts, all the fire finally burning quiet. He closed his eyes for a breath, then opened them again to her face. "I'm still here," he said, and for the first time, he meant it. The storm came again that night. A cold one rolling down from the northern peaks, full of thunder that sounded like the sky remembering war. The fire in their camp fought to stay alive, sparks snatched by the wind and carried into the dark. Rafe sat with his back against a rock, shirt open where the bandage clung to his shoulder. Lila knelt beside him, her face pale in the flicker. She cleaned the wound with water from her canteen, her hand steady even when her breath wasn't. "You should lie down," she said softly. He shook his head. "Hurts less sitting up." "That's a lie," she said. He almost smiled. "You're starting to know me too well." She tore another strip of cloth from her sleeve and wrapped it around his arm, tight enough to make him wince. Her eyes lifted to his. "I learned something watching you back there," she said. "You don't fight to live. You fight to end something that's already killed you." He met her gaze, the firelight trembling between them. "And you?" She looked down, tying the knot. "I fight because I can't stand still anymore." The wind whistled through the stones. A coyote called far off, thin and lonely. Rafe's eyes softened as he watched her. "You could have left me," he said. "Should have." "I know. Why didn't you?" "Because someone once told me kindness was the only thing worth losing." He let out a breath. "That was me." "I figured you'd forgotten." "Not something like that." The storm broke above them, rain coming in hard, cold sheets. She scrambled to pull a tarp over them, pressing it against the rock. Water ran through her hair, down her face. He reached up without thinking and brushed it away. His hand lingered against her cheek. The skin there was warm despite the rain. For a moment they just stared, neither moving. Lightning lit the canyon, white and fierce. She could see every scar on his face, every line carved by loss. He saw the defiance in her, the fear that made her brave instead of weak. Then the thunder rolled, and time began again. "Lila," he said, voice low. She looked at him, lips parted to speak, but no words came. The air between them was heavy, not from danger, but from the quiet pull of something neither could stop. He leaned forward, slow, not asking, not taking, just meeting what had already been there in every glance, every silence. Their foreheads touched first, breath mingling. Then his mouth found hers. It wasn't a kiss of fire or hunger. It was a promise, rough and trembling, like two hearts remembering how to be alive. Her fingers found his collar. His hand slid behind her neck. Rain fell around them, the fire hissing low, the world shrinking to warmth and breath. When they pulled apart, the storm had softened to a drizzle. She stayed close, her head resting against his chest. His heartbeat was slow, but strong, steady under her ear. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Didn't plan to." She laughed, a small, tired sound, but real. "Guess that makes it honest." "Guess it does." They sat like that while the night breathed around them. He thought of all the miles he'd ridden, all the graves he'd passed, and how none of it felt as heavy now. She thought of her father, of the bridge, of how peace could sometimes wear the face of a broken man. After a while she said, "You think it's over?" Rafe looked into the dark. "For Kincaid, maybe, but men like him always leave something behind. Another hand will pick up the same whip." "Then we stop them too," she said. He looked at her, surprise soft in his eyes. "We?" She met his gaze steady. "You think I came this far just to go back to selling flour? You'd trade peace for this life?" She smiled. "Peace was gone the day my father died. What's left is purpose." He nodded slowly. "Then you're a fool." "Maybe, but not the only one." The fire dimmed to embers. The wind cooled, bringing the scent of wet sage and earth. They made a small shelter against the rock, curling close for warmth. Her hand rested on his chest. His arms settled around her waist. Sleep didn't come easy. The desert never truly slept. But sometime before dawn, Rafe drifted and dreamed for the first time in years. He saw open fields, a fence mended straight, a woman's laughter in the wind. The sound didn't fade when he woke. He looked down at Lila sleeping, her hair tangled against his coat. For once, the ache inside him felt less like loss and more like living. But as the first light reached across the plain, Flint snorted. Rafe turned toward the ridge. Far off, small figures moved. Riders. Not Kincaids, but men carrying his brand on their coats. The remnants of a dying empire coming to finish what pride had started. He touched Lila's shoulder. "Up," he whispered. Her eyes opened at once, clear and ready. "How many?" "Too many," he said, "but they don't know we're alive." "Then we make sure they don't." She rose, loading her rifle. He watched her silhouette against the dawn. Strong, sure, beautiful in the way wild things are. The storm had passed, but another calm was building. One that would test what they'd just found in each other. Rafe holstered his gun and looked at her. "Whatever happens next," he said, "you ride when I tell you. And if I don't, then I'll ride with you." The sun crested the ridge, painting the canyon in blood-red light. Their shadows stretched long over the sand, side by side. The sun climbed high, turning the desert to gold and glare. Rafe and Lila moved along the ridge, every step watched by heat and silence. The riders below fanned out in a wide arc, 7 of them, maybe more. Kincaid's leftover men, bound by coin and vengeance, the kind of men who didn't know when to quit. They stopped at a stretch of broken rock. Rafe crouched behind a boulder and checked his revolver, the weight familiar in his hand. Lila watched the valley, her rifle balanced steady across her knees. "How many bullets?" she asked. "6," he said. She nodded. "Then we make 'em count." He looked at her, sweat at her temple, eyes sharp and calm. He'd seen soldiers crumble under less. She had courage born from something quieter, something that didn't shout to be seen. "They'll come from both sides," he said. "When I start shooting, you hold the ridge. Don't move until I do." She gave a small smile. "You're used to giving orders, aren't you?" "Only when I care if someone lives," he said. Her eyes softened, but she didn't answer. The first shot came from below, sharp, echoing off stone. The bullet split the air inches from Rafe's head. Flint reared and bolted toward the canyon wall. Rafe ducked low and fired back, the sound rolling like thunder. Dusk kicked up where one of the riders fell. Then the world broke open. Gunfire roared across the ridge. Rocks splintered. The smell of powder filled the air, thick and bitter. Rafe moved from cover to cover, firing slow, careful, each shot deliberate. Lila stayed above, her rifle cracking like a clock's heartbeat. One man tried climbing the ridge. She waited until he reached the halfway mark, then fired once. He fell back without a sound. Her hands trembled only after it was done. Rafe caught the movement of another, a tall one with a scar along his jaw, working his way through the shadows. The man raised his gun. Rafe aimed, but his arm burned with pain. He couldn't lift it fast enough. The shot never came. Lila's bullet found the man first. He dropped hard. Rafe turned toward her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. She met his gaze from across the ridge, face set like stone. He nodded once. Respect, quiet and deep. The fight dragged on. By the time the smoke began to clear, 4 men lay still in the dust. The rest turned their horses and vanished into the horizon, the echo of their defeat fading with them. Silence followed, wide and heavy, the kind that comes after thunder. Rafe stood slowly, his shoulder bleeding again. Lila came down the slope toward him, rifle still in hand. Her breath was fast, her cheeks flushed. She stopped a few feet away, scanning the bodies to make sure none stirred. "It's done," she said, "my for now." He answered. Her eyes moved to his arm. "You're hurt again." He glanced down, shrugged. "Just the same wounds reminding me I ain't finished paying yet." She stepped closer, touching the torn fabric near his shoulder. "You've paid enough." "Not yet." He said it softly, but there was something final in it. A man who'd carried guilt so long it had become part of his breathing. She took his hand, fingers small and sure against the calloused skin. "You can stop now, Rafe. You did what you came for." He looked at their joined hands. The wind moved through her hair, caught the sun. For a moment, he saw not the dust or blood or ghosts, just her. "Maybe I don't know how," he said. "Then I'll teach you," she whispered. The words landed like a promise. Simple, dangerous, true. He wanted to believe her. The desert around them felt endless, but her voice made it small. A world he could live inside. He reached up, touched her cheek. The gesture was hesitant, reverent. Her eyes closed at the contact. When she opened them again, something shifted. The line between survival and something far deeper. "You scared?" he asked. "Only of losing what I just found." He pulled her close. Their lips met again, slower this time, the kind of kiss that didn't ask for more than breath. It carried the weight of everything they'd lost, and the fragile hope that maybe not everything had to stay gone. The ridge wind blew hard. flapping the edges of his coat. Somewhere far off, thunder murmured again. Distant now, softer. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "What happens next?" she asked. He looked out across the land, the horizon blurring into heat. "There's a ranch north of here," he said. "My brother and I built it once. Burned to the ground after he died. Been thinking maybe it's time to raise it again." Her hand still held his. "You'd start over?" "With help," he said. She smiled. "Tired. Beautiful. Then let's start with mending you first." He laughed, quiet but real. It was the first true sound of peace he'd made in years. They spent the rest of the day burying the dead, marking the graves with simple stones. Lila said a few words for them, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. The wind carried her voice out across the desert, soft as prayer. By the time the sun fell, their shadows stretched long again, two figures standing over a place where vengeance had finally gone silent. That night, they built a small fire. Rafe leaned back against his saddle, watching the sparks climb. Lila sat beside him, the light touching her face. He said, "Never thought I'd see another dawn without blood in it." She turned to him. "Then promise me this one won't be your last." He didn't answer right away. He looked at her, at the way the firelight lived in her eyes, and said, "I'll try." Her smile came slow, but it reached all the way to her gaze. "That's enough." The stars came out then, sharp and bright over the dark land. He felt her shoulder against his, steady and warm. For the first time in years, Rafe Calder let himself believe in tomorrow. The nights that followed were quiet. Too quiet for men and women who had lived too long under the sound of guns. The desert healed itself faster than they did, wind smoothing away hoofprints, rain washing the blood from stone. But ghosts left behind don't vanish. They settle, waiting for breath to stir them again. Rafe and Lila rode north along the valley. Flint's stride had slowed, and so had Rafe's. His shoulder mended, but the pain came back at night when everything else grew still. Lila never asked about the nightmares. She simply sat beside him when they came, letting silence do the mending words could not. They reached the remains of the Calder ranch by the fourth day. Nothing left but charred beams, half a fence, and a well still full of clean water. The air there smelled of cedar and rain. The land had been sleeping, waiting for a reason to live again. Rafe dismounted, boots sinking into the soft dirt. He ran a hand along one of the blackened posts. "We built this in spring," he said quietly. "My brother, a man named Amos Lee, and me. Thought we'd grow something honest. Cattle, wheat maybe. Turns out the land don't grow peace as easy as grass." Lila joined him, her shawl tugged by the wind. Maybe it just needed time. He looked at her, brow creased. "Time don't fix ashes." "Then we build over them," she said. "That's what my father used to say." He smiled faintly. "He sounds like a man who never gave up." "He didn't," she said. "Even when the storm took half the crop, he'd plant again. Said giving up was for men who didn't know how to love what they lost." Rafe looked out over the plain, the low hills, the broken fence lines, the dry stream that once carried spring water. The wind moved across the grass like breath. For the first time, the land didn't look empty to him. It looked waiting. They spent the morning working, clearing debris, gathering what wood could still burn. She built a small fire by the well while he dragged timbers from the fallen barn. The sun climbed high, but it wasn't cruel that day. At midday, Lila found a few wildflowers growing in the shade of a rock. Yellow, fragile, defiant. Oh, she picked one and tucked it into her hair. Rafe caught the sight of it when she came back. He said, "You wear the desert better than anyone I've seen." She laughed. "That a compliment?" "Maybe. I'm out of practice." "Then keep practicing." Her smile lingered even as she turned away. He watched her move, the grace of someone who had learned how to keep living through loss. Something in his chest tightened. Not pain this time, but a pull he couldn't fight. Later that afternoon, they found an old trunk buried in the rubble of the house. Inside were photographs, half burned. His brother, a younger Rafe, a woman whose face was too faded to name. Lila brushed dust from the edges. "Your family?" He nodded. "What's left of it?" She handed him one of the photos. "You still carry them?" she said. "Don't know how to let go," he answered. She looked at him then, eyes steady. "Maybe you don't have to. Maybe you just make room." He didn't answer. The words sank deep, quiet as falling rain. That evening, when the sun slipped low, they sat together by the well. The sky was a mix of rose and amber, the kind that made the world feel like it might forgive itself. Lila said, "I keep thinking about what happens after this. You can fix this place, make it home again." He looked at the horizon. "You think home's something a man can rebuild?" "I think it's something he can find again if he's got the right reason." "And you?" he asked. "You'd stay?" She hesitated, tracing her finger through the dirt. "Maybe, if someone asked." He turned to her, the fading light catching his eyes. "I ain't good at asking." "Then just tell me," she whispered. He leaned close. The air between them felt heavy with everything they hadn't said. His voice came low. "Then stay. Not for me, just for the land. It deserves someone who still believes in growing." She smiled, soft and trembling. "And if I stay for both?" He didn't answer with words. He reached for her, slow, deliberate. She came to him like she'd been waiting all her life for that moment. Their lips met again, but this time there was no storm, no fear, just warmth, the kind that came after years of cold. When they broke apart, she rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Feels like peace," she murmured. "Feels like home," he said. They stayed like that until the stars came out, 1,000 small lights above an old wound that was finally closing. The fire burned low, their hands still joined, but peace never lasted long in the west. Somewhere out in the dark, a coyote cried, and from beyond the ridge came the distant echo of hooves, faint but certain. Rafe's eyes opened. "We're not alone." Lila looked up, fear flickering in her face. "Who is it?" "Don't know yet," he said, "but trouble don't ride quiet." He stood reaching for his gun. The air grew colder, the kind that carries warning. She rose beside him, the flowers still in her hair. He looked at her and said, "Whatever happens next, remember this. Peace ain't given, it's chosen. Every day." Her voice was steady. "Then I choose it with you." He smiled once, that quiet, tired smile of a man who'd finally found what he didn't know he was looking for, and turned toward the sound of the coming storm. Night came fast over the valley, dark as old whiskey. The stars hadn't yet broken through, and the wind carried the smell of horses and dust. Rafe stood at the edge of the ruined fence line, watching the ridge. The sound of hooves was closer now. Steady, deliberate, not hurried. Whoever was coming wasn't afraid. Lila stayed near the fire, her rifle across her lap. The flower she'd worn was gone, blown somewhere into the dark. She didn't speak, but he could feel her eyes on him. 3 riders appeared against the horizon, silhouettes in the thin light of the rising moon. Their coats snapped in the wind. Rafe didn't move, just watched as they drew closer. When they stopped 20 yards out, he recognized the one in front, Sheriff Dalton from Drywater. Behind him, 2 deputies he didn't know. "Evening, Calder," Dalton called. Rafe lowered his gun but didn't holster it. "Sheriff," Dalton dismounted, boots crunching in the dry grass. "Heard Kincaid's gone. Heard you were the one who put him under." Rafe said nothing. Dalton looked past him to the burned barn and the woman standing by the fire. His face softened a little. "Town's talking. Half say you're a killer. The other half say you cleaned out what the law was too scared to touch." "Doesn't much matter what they say," Rafe replied. "The truth don't change." Dalton nodded. "Maybe not, but the law still needs to hear it. You coming back to Drywater?" Rafe shook his head. "I'm done with that town." "Don't make no difference. I got to take your statement." Rafe's jaw tightened. "You mean my freedom?" The sheriff met his eyes. "I mean the truth." Lila stepped forward then, her voice clear in the still air. "He saved me, Sheriff. Saved your town, too. If Kincaid had lived, none of us would have had a roof by winter." Dalton turned toward her, hat in his hands. "Ma'am, I don't doubt that, but every man who draws a gun's got to answer for the trail it leaves." Rafe looked at the ground, the firelight flickering over his face. "What happens if I don't come?" Dalton sighed. "Then I come for you." They stood like that for a long moment, the desert wind humming low between them. Then Rafe said quietly, "Give me until sunrise." Dalton studied him, then nodded once. "Sunrise. After that, I'll ride." He turned and mounted up. The 3 men rode back into the dark, their silhouettes swallowed by the valley. Lila came to stand beside Rafe. "You can't go back there," she said. "I don't plan to," he answered. "Then what did you just promise?" He stared at the horizon where the sheriff had vanished. "A lie I might make true." She frowned. "You mean to run?" He looked at her, eyes tired but calm. "I've been running half my life. Maybe it's time to stop, just not in a cell." "You think the law won't find you?" He shook his head. "I think I've earned a little peace before it does." She turned away, arms crossed tight against the wind. "And what about me?" He hesitated. "You've got a store, a town that needs you. You'll be safe there." Her laugh came sharp and small. "Safe? You think I followed you through storms and gunfire to go back to selling flour?" He looked at her then. Really looked. The strength, the hurt, the fire that had refused to die. "You deserve more than this road." She stepped closer, voice trembling. "Maybe, but not without you." Silence again, only the crackle of the fire and the sigh of the wind moving through the grass. He wanted to tell her to go, to save herself from the weight of his past, but the words stuck somewhere deep in his throat. Instead, he reached for her hand. "If you stay, Lila, you're choosing a life that don't end easy." "I've already chosen," she said. Her hand fit into his, small but sure. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of it, fragile, real. When he opened them, the moon had climbed higher, silvering the ruins around them. "Then we ride before dawn," he said. I'm to where?" she asked. "Anywhere the sun don't judge," he said. They packed light. A few supplies, a canteen, a blanket rolled tight. She doused the fire. The smoke rose in a thin gray ribbon, carried off by the wind. Before mounting up, Rafe looked back once at the land that had been his brother's dream. The black timbers, the half-built fence, the ghost standing quiet among the ashes. He whispered, "It's yours now. Rest." Then he turned to Lila. She waited on her mare, watching him through the moonlight. "You ready?" he asked. She smiled soft, brave. "I've been ready since Drywater." They rode out together, hooves whispering over the sand. The horizon ahead glowed faintly with the first promise of dawn. Behind them, the sheriff's fire lit for the night, a small flicker far away. Ahead, the world opened wide, empty, dangerous, full of chance. He looked at her once more, the wind tugging at her hair. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together." She nodded. "Always." And for the first time since he could remember, the word didn't sound like a lie. The first light of dawn spilled over the desert like a quiet prayer. The sky stretched wide and pale, streaked with the kind of gold that made a man believe the world might start over. Rafe and Lila rode side by side, their shadows long across the sand. The air was cool, the kind that tasted like new beginnings. They didn't speak for a while. The sound of the horses, the rhythm of breath, the whisper of wind. That was enough. The night behind them had taken more than it gave, but somehow they were still here, still breathing, still moving towards something that might resemble peace. Rafe's shoulder ached, but he didn't mind. Pain was honest. It told him he'd survived. "You think he'll come after us?" Lila asked quietly. "Dalton?" She nodded. Rafe took a long breath. Maybe he'll remember the look in Kincaid's eyes when he went down and decide it's better left buried. And if he doesn't? He glanced at her, the faintest trace of a smile on his face. "Then we'll keep riding till the trail runs out. Maybe that's all any of us do." The land ahead began to rise, a ridge of red stone leading to open plains. Beyond that, the world waited, untamed, unpromised. Rafe felt the pull of it, that same restless hunger that had once kept him alone. But this time, he wasn't alone. They stopped at the top of the ridge. From there they could see miles. The curve of dry rivers, the shimmer of distant heat, the faint line of mountains like a sleeping spine against the horizon. Lila's hair caught the sunlight, turning it to fire. He looked at her. "You ever seen something this wide and thought it could hold everything you ever lost?" She smiled faintly. "No, but I think it can hold what comes next." Rafe dismounted and walked to the edge. The wind met him there, clean and sharp. It carried the scent of rain far away, the echo of thunder from another storm not yet born. He thought about his brother, about Kincaid, about all the men he'd buried in his past, and for the first time, he felt no weight pressing down, just space. Lila joined him, her hand finding his. "What are you thinking?" she asked. He looked out at the endless stretch of land. "That maybe the world don't need more fighting, just more people who know when to stop." She squeezed his hand. "And do you?" He turned to her. "I do now." They stayed like that, hand in hand, watching the sun climb higher. The light hit her face, and he saw something there. Hope, fragile and stubborn, the kind that survives through storms. He said, "You ever wonder why the desert's so quiet after a gunfight?" She tilted her head. "Why?" 'cause it knows men always leave before they learn how to listen. She smiled, that small, knowing smile he'd come to love. Then maybe we stay a while. He nodded. Maybe we do. The wind softened. The morning opened around them. He turned toward her and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. She leaned into his touch. For a heartbeat, the world was still. No ghosts, no gunfire, no shadows left to chase. Just the quiet warmth of two souls who'd walked through fire and come out whole. He said, reckon we could start a new ranch out here, something small, something honest. And what would we call it, she asked. He looked toward the horizon. Redemption. She laughed softly. You think anyone would buy cattle branded with a word like that? He smiled. Don't care if they do, it's for us. They stood together, the morning sun burning brighter, the desert alive with color, gold and rust and promise. Flint stamped his hooves, eager for the next road. Lila said, you think we'll find peace out here? Rafe looked at her, eyes steady and sure. No, Lila, we'll make it. The wind lifted her hair again, carrying her laughter out across the empty land. He stepped closer, pulled her gently against him. She rested her head against his chest, and for the first time, he held someone without fear of what might follow. The sun climbed higher. The desert shimmered with new light. Behind them lay the ashes of everything that had been lost. Ahead, the long stretch of everything worth finding. He whispered, this is the last gunfight I'll ever fight. She looked up at him, her voice barely a breath. Then let it be the first day you live. He kissed her, soft and certain. The wind moved through the grass, and somewhere far off, the world exhaled. The story of Rafe Calder and Lila Monroe didn't end with vengeance. It ended with dawn, with healing, with love that didn't burn. It warmed. If this story has touched a tender place in your heart, let your light stay with us. Comment, share, and subscribe so this western fire keeps burning for you.